Hi guys, welcome back to The Contented Plant. Today we are talking all about the Philodendron Micans. This is one of my very favorite plants. It's been on my wish list for quite a while. My mom stopped in one of the local nurseries and they had it, so she grabbed it for me and I am so excited. It just came off new plant quarantine, so we will go ahead and talk about how I like to care for my Philodendron Micans and all of the tips and tricks to keep it happy and healthy. So let's get started. So you can find this plant growing native in the tropical regions of Mexico and the Caribbean. It actually loves nice, humid, warm climates, so it can grow happily outside wherever you can mimic that environment. As you can see, it vines just like a typical philodendron, like the Philodendron Brazil or the heartleaf philodendron. It's very similar in how it grows and vines. This is an aroid, so it does like to either climb or trail. So I want to show you guys, these are the adult grown out leaves. This one looks a little bit damaged because this came from a nursery and probably kind of got tossed around a little bit, but this is all the new growth that it's put out since I've had it. It's doing fantastic. I keep it in a spot that has bright and direct light, and it has just been shooting out new leaves all over the place. So I'm very excited to see how this grows. My goal for this plant is to have it in a big hanging basket and just have a wall of these beautiful Philodendron Mican leaves hanging down from the plant. So this plant has really interesting colors. Some of it has kind of a burgundy color pattern, and then you can see that the leaves have kind of a velvety sheen to them, which is stunning and so beautiful, which is one of the reasons I was attracted to this plant. Now, as this plant grows and matures, the leaves can change. Actually, if this ever gets to a full-grown mature Philodendron Micans, which it normally won't indoors, it only will outdoors, it can actually lose the velvet texture and turn into kind of a basic green leaf again. So as a immature houseplant, it keeps this burgundy color and that velvet sheen on the leaves. So this plant requires bright indirect light or medium indirect light. The lower the light, it's going to affect the color on the plant. It's also going to affect the vine and how this vine is growing for you and how bushy it is. So if you have this plant in a really low light area, it will survive, it will probably grow slowly, and it will put out leaves that are very green, and you're not going to get a lot of these burgundy leaves or these different color variations. It's just going to be the basic green leaves because the plant is trying to survive with low light. Also, if this plant is put in a very low light area, the vine can become very leggy and it won't have a nice bushy leaf pattern. So you can see the leaves here are growing about once every 2 inches or so. And what I'm hoping is as I give it more light, these leaves start to come more and more often, so I have a nice bushy vine. And I'm going to encourage that by putting it in a bright spot. You can also encourage your plant to be bushier by pruning it. If it puts out a vine that's really leggy and you move it into a bright spot, I would recommend pruning that vine back so that it grows back into a fuller, more beautiful plant for you. This plant, like most aroids, does not like to have super wet feet. It can get root rot, so you need to be careful with your watering schedule. With my aroids, I let them dry out quite a bit. I always do the finger test. I put my finger in there and put my finger way down into the soil. And if I come out with a dry finger, then I know it's time to give it a really good watering and a very good saturation. Otherwise, I just let it be. This is not a plant that you want to walk by and just trickle a tiny bit of water in. That can encourage root rot and you're going to get uneven moisture spots in your potting medium. For this plant, I like to pot it in potting soil, perlite, and orchid bark. That's just my standard mix that I use for all of my aroids that seems to keep them really happy. Lots of other people like to put it in moss or other potting mediums, and that works too, as long as it's a quick draining soil mix. So you have a couple options when you're growing this plant. You can either grow it as a tabletop plant, and that would mean you're going to be doing a lot of pruning because you're just going to constantly keep pruning it back to keep a nice bushy shape but not really let it vine or trail. I have it as a tabletop plant right now only because it's very small. By next spring, this is going to be very long with nice long vines, and then I will convert it into a hanging planter. This works great in a hanging basket. If you put it where the light is, you can encourage the vines to come all the way down the front and create a big, beautiful basket of leaves, kind of like my Marble Queen pothos back here. You can also train this vine to climb. It actually doesn't require a lot of training. It loves to vine, so if you put a moss pole in the pot with it, it will just go ahead and climb up that moss pole, and you might even see that it gets larger and larger leaves because most of these plants are incredibly happy if they are allowed to climb like they're used to in nature. For pests, this plant is, like all house plants, very susceptible to spider mites, thrips, you name it. Those nasty little pests will get on it if you allow it. So how I like to combat this is when I do water it, I always put this in my kitchen sink. I turn the spray nozzle on and I just spray all of the leaves, kind of like what would happen if it was to be in a nice rainstorm in nature. And I just thoroughly soak all the leaves. That helps wash the dust off, so it helps the leaves photosynthesize better, and it also helps keep the pests away. Spider mites in particular love dusty, dry leaves to make their home. I have treated this plant with a neem oil spray. When I got it, I noticed that it did have what I consider to be a few signs of pest damage. You can kind of see this leaf has some spots going on here, and that made me nervous, so I kept it away from my other houseplants and gave it a couple treatments with the neem oil to get rid of any little bugs that might have hopped along from the nursery to my home. The temperature in your home needs to be warm, but you don't need to go crazy and turn your house up to 90 degrees like it would be if you were sitting in the Caribbean. Your normal household temperature will grow this plant just fine. However, if it is wintertime where you live and you have your heat running constantly, keep in mind that this is a tropical plant and it loves humidity. So if you notice that it's putting out dry leaves or the edges here are super dry, just the tips usually are the first sign that you need you need to up the humidity in your home, then go ahead and either add a small plant humidifier next to it, or you can group it with other plants. They will naturally keep the humidity up for each other, or you can put a tray next to it with some pebbles and water. If you find the leaves on your Philodendron Micans are starting to curl inwards, that might be a sign that you're not watering it often enough and you need to increase the frequency of your watering schedule. To propagate this plant, it is super, super simple. If you've watched any of my other videos on propagating, this is just like propagating the heartleaf philodendron or the Philodendron Brazil. The vining plants have these conveniently spaced nodes here. There's one here, there's one here. The nodes are right where the new leaf is growing out of. This is the internodal spacing, and if I was going to propagate this vine, I would cut it right here. And I would place the node down in water and just wait a few weeks and you will have new, beautiful Philodendron Mican roots. So to sum it up really quickly, my basic care tips for this plant would be make sure it's potted in a pot with a drainage hole in a quick, light draining soil mixture. I would also keep it in a bright, indirect light spot if you want to encourage a nice bushy plant with beautiful coloring. This plant will grow fast if you keep it in an area where it's really happy in bright, indirect light. Make sure that you water it sparingly. Make sure you do the soil test and that it doesn't already have a saturated soil base when you're adding water to it. I would also make sure to give those leaves a good washing every once in a while so you make sure you don't get any pests on your plant. Overall, this is a very easy plant to care for. It's one of my personal favorites. I just love the long vining plants, and I especially love these beautiful velvet leaves on this plant. It's just gorgeous. Please let me know if you have any additional care questions down below, and I will do my best to answer them for you. Otherwise, please like and subscribe, and we will see you next time at The Contented Plant. Bye-bye.